And then Barbara wrote to me. We had never met before. And I told her, gee, I can't do an unsolved case. But we kept in touch. Every hearing, every disappointment, every step ahead, she'd let me know. And finally I thought, doggone it, I'm going to do it.
What was it about? You mentioned that the same thing that you're talking about. Can't remember if it's in the foreword or the first part of the book or wherever, that there's only two cases that you've ever handled where you had that kind of instinctual reaction.
Yeah, and those are the two.
The very beginning.
Those are the two, because Ted Bundy sure fooled me. Here I spent a year at him with a crisis clinic all night long, and well, not only 2 nights a week, but I never sensed anything at all with him. But with these two, I just felt both the need to speak up for the survivors and for the dead.
What about this? This case has never been anywhere close to as straightforward as many of the other cases that we've dealt with. Why? What was it about it for you early on that just kept your interest, that just kept you focused somehow in the back of your mind someday?
I think a lot of it was because I was a cop and she was a cop, and there was that kinship between us, even though, of course, I get to know the dead better than I know anybody in life, but I never knew Rhonda. And I had daughters the same age. And I thought, what would I do? Well, I always think that, especially when it's a young woman. But it was almost extrasensory. I just knew that one day I would write this book. Well, of course, Rhonda's last husband, second husband, Ron Reynolds, would not talk to me. I called and I wrote, and I got a letter from his lawyer saying that it would be too painful for him to go through it again, and Ron didn't want to bring it up, and so I never was able to talk to him or anybody in the immediate family. It's a matter of like a Rubik's Cube, trying to get it all to fit in together. And people talk to me that I never thought would talk to me. One of Ron Reynolds' mistresses was very open. And we went out for Chinese food, and she gave me pictures of them together. And she's a dynamite woman. All of his women, for one thing, they all had money or access to money. That was his preferred type. And he soon turned them into kind of Stepford wives in a way, as far as taking care of him. Now, this doesn't mean he's guilty. He's an interesting man. And I would have so much liked to have talked to him, because I could give a more rounded picture. There are many likely suspects in this case, many, that some people may not have thought of. So I present it, and thank God for people who were brave enough to come forward, and some came forward for their own interest, but it added to building the case. And I don't know what the authorities, the law enforcement authorities, will think when they see the things that Barbara has found and that the two of us have found together, and the interviewing that we did after the hearing. I think they are. I was surprised with the information that Barbara and I turned up. So I only write about subjects that interest me, and I figure if they interest me, then my readers will be interested, because we all think alike. And this really interests me, and I'm not done yet. The book is out, but there's always the paperback to come. There's always a chance to update. So,
do you think there's more developments to come?
Yes, absolutely.
Do you think your book will help bring about?
I think so. And we have over $30,000 reward for someone who comes forward with information leading to the arrest and conviction of the killer.
In your mind, this is a murder case?
Oh, there's no question. In this case, just Rhonda, and justice is a trite term, but I could feel, and I do feel my victims of when I'm writing in there, right behind my left shoulder. I know people are going to think I'm nuts, but I have piles of research. In this case, I had stacks. I just finally put them away. But if I couldn't find something I needed, I'd say, Rhonda, where is that? Where is that report? And I'd put my hand right on it. I had the same thing with Anne Marie Fahey, the governor's secretary in Delaware. It's just, there's some place demanding, begging, urging the story to come out, so they will have some serenity or final serenity. So it was interesting to do it this way, and I got to be a cop again in a way, and that was fun. But and for me, it's no fear, because it's a dicey thing to write. There are people out there who are guilty of murder, a person, and
in this case.
In this one, yes, and that's kind of scary. But for me, it's no fear too. My kids tried to talk me out of it.
Really?
Mm-hmm. So.
And why wouldn't you let them talk you out of it?
Oh, I was committed. There was no way. There was no way. Number one, I would like to see the killer identified and convicted. Number two, of course, I'd like another bestseller, because they've all been so far. That's selfish for me, but the main purpose is to find someone, to identify someone who got away with murder of a wonderful young woman who had her flaws. I mean, she wasn't perfect. She didn't have a halo. Maybe she does now, but she deserves to have her time to be respected. I had to criticize law enforcement, which is very difficult for me, because I'm an ex-cop. My grandpa was a sheriff. My uncle was a sheriff. My other uncle was the medical examiner. My cousin was the prosecutor. I just still idolize cops. I know they're bad ones, but it hurts me to ever have to write something that they did wrong. And so that was hard. That was a hurdle for me to get over. In the midst of this, you probably know, I had something akin to spinal meningitis, and for a week almost died. And so I had a 3-month break in the middle of the book, but as soon as I could get myself to the computer, I think the first day I could do 15 minutes, and then within about a month I could write 8 hours a day, and towards the end I was writing 12 hours a day. I knew I had to finish it, but it was so hard to be interrupted in the middle, because you're flowing and everything's going great, and then boom. So I'm very glad, thank God, to be alive, and I was so glad when I finished it. I thought, this is a miracle. This is a miracle in so many ways. There's so many people say, don't you get jaded when you write about murder all the time? And I don't, because there are so many good people who go out of their way to help solve a case. You start with the detectives and the prosecutors, but you get witnesses who maybe are afraid to come forward, but they do come forward. You get family members who, even though they're grieving, want to help. So in the end, the balance is the good people are way down here because it's such a heavy weight, and the bad people, there are only 1 or 2 usually in each book. So I'm rewarded with the goodness and kindness of humanity as compared to the wickedness. my interest in the psychopathology of the criminal mind started way back then. And I've always been more concerned with why rather than how. I don't like to dwell on blood and the grisly parts. And I think, and this sounds chauvinistic, but I think male authors tend to put in pictures of bodies. I do have a picture of Rhonda in here. I would not have put it in, but her mother said, no, I think you should. I think you need to demonstrate to the reader how she looked and how it couldn't have happened the way it was said. So I just grew up wanting to be a cop and being fascinated with detective magazines. I started out writing humor. I wrote jokes for Phyllis Diller and a couple of other comedians. And I always wrote for the college's humor magazines and the high school's humor magazines. And so I love to do that, and that's fun. But I'm more likely to do that for somebody's retirement party or something, you know. Mm-hmm. And in the dorm at the University of Washington, I used to sit in the lounge after dinner with my friends, and I'd read the newspaper, and I'd find some really shocking case, and I'd insert somebody's name in it who was sitting there. And their eyes would get bigger and bigger, and the other people would be looking at them. Finally, they caught on that I was doing that. But that was fun. So I like to do fun stuff. I really have a pretty upbeat